we are going to add some steam so that it's a little bit more believable in the shot here. To do that, let's go ahead and make a solid. I'm just going to pre-comp it as is, and we'll call it steamy coffee. No, steamy coffee work. So in here, I'm going to go ahead and add CC Particle Systems 2. This comes with After Effects. It's ready to go. It can do some pretty cool stuff when you play with it. Out of the box, it doesn't look quite like a steamy cup of coffee, but we'll get there eventually. First, we got to figure out what system to use. I'm going to switch to Twirly. I played around with a lot of different ones, and I like Twirly a lot. You'll notice that gravity starts with 1. So in this scenario, we don't want gravity to be pulling down our particles. In fact, we want it to be doing the opposite. So we can actually reverse the gravity so that the particles will be rising. They're going way too fast, clearly. So let's just go ahead and shrink the velocity way down. Actually, we can just set the velocity to 0 for a second, and you can just see what gravity alone is doing. Let's generate a lot less particles here for a second. Similar to what we did before, I'm going to take this particle system and back it up. And now you can see kind of midway in the system. First thing I might want to do too is just kind of make this shaped more like a coffee cup. So I'm just going to go ahead and bring the radius out a little bit. Maybe the radius in Y I'll bring to almost to 0 because it's we're looking kind of sideways at the coffee cup. Okay, cool. So now they're flying up from there. Great, they still look insane. Let's go ahead and lower the position of the producer also. So this will give us a little bit more latitude for comping. Clearly we have way too much gravity still in the negative. So let's shrink this down to something really small. There we go. Let's work on these particles. Right now the particles are tiny, and the cheat for making something kind of foggy or atmospheric with your particles would be to make them a lot larger. Also not lines. Let's go ahead and do like faded spheres. Immediately more foggy. That's great. Birth size, you want to do something pretty small. Death size, you do want it to get bigger. You'll notice that as you go larger, it immediately gives you the feeling that steam would, as it dissipates into the air, the particles are spreading out. The color's bugging me here, so let's go ahead and fix that. We'll just do like a black and white thing for now. We'll do a birth of white, death of black. I like to do that so that over the life of the particles, they naturally sort of disappear. We're going to be comping this additively anyway. So basically by having it go black, it's going to basically have it fade off. Opacity map will have it fade in and out probably. And that'll kind of hide the generation of the particles at the start. Also kind of help them in their fall off at the end. All right, we've got something that looks slightly steamy. Here's where the transfer mode can come in. Since we have enough particles and they're kind of overlapping each other, we might want to play with screen or add. You'll notice as soon as I adjust the exposure, you can really see the latitude that's happening now as the brightness of each particle is being added to the one below it. I'm definitely going to stick with additive for now. And what's cool about this, we can just bring down our max opacity for the particles overall. Because remembering at the end of the day, we're making an incredibly subtle little bit of steam. I might just boost this just for viewing purposes. It's rising still too fast probably. Let's just gravity even less. Let's see what happens if I make the particles last longer. What we can also do with this pre-roll is kind of nice. I can just find a spot and start messing with some of these parameters, like the birth rate. If you go too low, you start seeing individual spheres. You go too high, it gets more dense. But you can then take the max opacity and start counteracting that by bringing it down. And what you're actually going to end up doing is getting a more realistic sim here. So now you can kind of see it rising up there. And now you aren't looking at individual particles, which is nice. You're actually just kind of getting this overall vibe of where the densest part of the steam is. We could even bring our max opacity down even further. That looks great. I'm actually super happy with that already. So one thing that's worth playing with, we can throw, let's say you threw like a levels on it. You can go into the alpha for levels and you can start crunching down the gamma of the alpha. And what that might do for you is really accentuate the areas where the particles are overlapping the most. So I've got it about 0.67. You're left with kind of the main moments of steam. And if you think of looking at a steaming cup of anything, you're catching hints in different locations. It's not a uniform steam that's rising up. You're actually just catching little tiny tidbits here and there of points where the moisture is coalescing the most. That's cool. I like that. There's another trick I want to show you too. So maybe we'll keep that, maybe we won't. Just so you can visually see this, I'm going to put a black solid as a guide layer. This will allow me to actually up this exposure so you can actually see it. When you're dealing with something with such low transparency, if you actually leave it with a transparent background, it only goes so far with the slider when you're trying to up the exposure. You can't actually see it. So by just putting this on as a guide layer, it allows me to then control it with this slider so you can easily see what I'm talking about. So if you're happy with what you've got, another thing you can do is duplicate it. And in the new one, you could just shift the seed. And on that one, you add a vector blur. And vector blur is really cool because what you can do with that, if we increase this value to the right, it will sort of pinch the pixels all together. It sort of melds it together in an organic way that hides the fact that it's generated from a bunch of clunky spheres. And you could take that, mix it on top of the other one, so you have kind of two working together. And you could sort of take both their opacities, play around with different amounts of mixing the two, and that gives you just even more to play with. Now we just have some nice light little steam. So let's go ahead and go back to the main work finally. We're at the point where now we need to track it in to the plate. I need to find where the coffee cup is in 3D. So we'll go back to where we've got all our 3D track stuff. There's one there. That must be the coffee cup. Or not. That actually could be the thing behind the coffee cup. I think I might just use this to start. As far as distance from camera goes, that should be about the same spot the coffee cup is. So I'm gonna go ahead and copy them, go into our steamy coffee work, paste the camera and the null. I really should make sure they're pre-comped alone before I then work on putting it in 3D. Now I can copy the position, paste it on my steam. I'll rotate it so it's facing camera. I'll use the anchor point to shift it up. I'm going to temporarily throw levels and pinch the exposure way up so I can see where it is. I can do small adjustments using these. I'm actually going to err on the side of too low because I can very easily just mask out the lip of the mug. So we've got our steam, it's in there. And then I'm just going to want to double check that. I mean, I've got this in the right spot in 3D space. I just want to confirm that that is true. Uh-oh, well, he definitely grabs it and moves with it. So we're going to have to figure out the solution for that. Let me at least make sure it's sticking up to the point where he grabs it. And it looks like it is. And he starts to shift it right around here. I'm going to have to bring his hand back in front of it. Let's go ahead and just go back up to the main work and just see again how this is comping. Whoops. Little bit bright. I can just pull this back down here easily too. This is another thing where it's hard to tell until you watch it moving full speed, that you might be like, oh, that's way too distracting. But we're going to assume that it's going to be pretty distracting once it's moving. You barely want to see it on a still frame, and you know that it's going to be more visible as soon as it's moving. All right, so the last thing we're going to have to do here is make sure that the steam is following the coffee cup as he moves it up to his mouth. One way we can do that is by keyframing the position of the emitter itself so that it will follow along where the coffee mug is. And we can also control the birth rate of the particles so that as it's moving up, not as many particles will be generated. And then once it comes to its resting spot, they'll start being generated again. And this should give us a pretty believable motion. Now I'm just tweaking the parameters just a little bit, getting the keyframes in the right spot to make it look just right. Let's take a look at the steam now in the main comp. Now that we're seeing it in motion, it is way too intense still. It's probably twice as visible as it needs to be, but the idea is there and it's working. And as he lifts it, it kind of dies down a bit. And then as it comes to a rest, it starts steaming again. All that's going to work really well. We're going to need to add a little bit more roto just to make sure his hand actually occludes the steam. And there we have it.